Welcome, Lee Shoquist of ChicagoFilm.com for the third entry in our Friday the 40th series. We're talking about Friday the 13th in 3D. I have some 3D glasses around here somewhere. I just couldn't find them. I think they were from the solar eclipse or lunar eclipse or whatever we had a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I feel unprepared. I'm sorry.
I mean, look, I have got my glasses from when I saw this in 1982 somewhere, but I couldn't drag them up tonight. So I don't know where they are, but they're hiding around here somewhere. So I still have got those black and white cardboard rimmed glasses. It was a big deal at the time.
It's a big deal now. Those things are probably collector's items.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I saw this film. This is I have a soft spot always for this film because it was the first Friday film I saw theatrically. And I saw it on the Wednesday 99-cent matinee of the opening week in the middle of the summer, and it was a big deal because to get into this movie, my friend's mother drove us and went up and bought the tickets, and then she made the mistake of telling the cashier at the theater that she was buying the tickets and dropping us off. I don't know why you would engage with the... And they said, oh, no, you can't do that. You've got to accompany them, because accompany was a really big word with rated R movies, right? You had to be accompanied.
Oh, sure.
So she bought a ticket as well and then just accompanied us to the door of the auditorium and then went out the door and left us there. But this was my first time seeing a Friday movie in the theater, so it always has a special thing for me.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen this on the big screen in 3D. So I'm hoping that in 2 years or whatever, that someone does a re-release, some kind of a special showing, because I think that'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, I don't even think I've seen it in 3D on home video, maybe once, but I don't remember it because it's always different when you're watching it home. I don't know, something about the presentation is wonky.
Yeah, I've seen it home on 3D and it just doesn't look good. And maybe the fact is that it just doesn't look good because it's of its time, right? And it seemed to look really good at the time, but it just somehow doesn't look good now. And even when you look at the effects, which we'll be talking about, it's just all this stuff, right? Which is fine, but it's not going to look good.
Yeah, and 3D movies now are so sophisticated that it's been a while since I've really noticed a 3D gimmicky shot in a modern picture. But looking back at 1982, they've got everything from, a guy putting up a pole on some laundry that he's got up outside and he's poking it right at the camera to fire pokers and eyeballs popping out. And yo-yos and popcorn. It's almost like a demo reel for 3D instead of being related to any kind of story they're trying to tell.
So the question is really, now 3D is all about immersion, as they call it. You have to be immersed in the other world, and that's what it's supposed to do. But for my money, the more fun 3D is this kind of 3D. And Metal Storm and so many other 3D movies that were out at the time, I mean, they were about effects. Now it's about immersion, right?
Yeah. That's a good observation. I wonder what an immersive Friday the 13th movie would be like.
I know. I'll be there.
Yeah. So we left off last time, and I had this hypothesis. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it or consider, but the idea that when we last see Ginny and Paul in Friday the 13th Part 2 with Jason jumping through the window, that was all a dream sequence, because Part 3 picks up in Jason's shrine shack, and it ends with Ginny macheting him through the shoulder, like pretty deep, and he's just passed out on the ground, and they look underneath the sack and they get revulsed, and then they go away. We see Jason next kind of slowly pick up the machete and the zoom in on his mom's head. Now, the next time we see Jason, it looks like it's the next evening, so I suppose it's possible he could have done that thing with Ginny and Paul, but I don't know, it just feels like they escaped or called the police or something. I don't know where reality starts and fantasy ends.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have an expression now in the culture called my truth, which is not exactly the truth.
All right. What is your truth about Friday the 13th?
We're going to leave that alone for whatever it means today. But in the case of whether it was all a dream, like we know the entire season of Dallas was a dream, remember?
Oh yeah.
Um, I don't know. We'll probably never find out, but it's an interesting hypothesis. I mean, by your logic, and given the fact that the third film was made in California, it would take quite a bit for Jason to get cross country in the day as well, even though we know it's set at Camp Crystal Lake. So I don't really know. I mean, I have to reject that hypothesis on my own personal grounds, my Friday the 13th values, because I love the ending of the second one so much that I can't get my head around it not being real, but I respect the interpretation.
Well, maybe it was real to Ginny. That was her truth, her lived experience, even if it was hallucination.
Hey, stranger things, right, have happened. Ginny would have been able to tell us that she'd been in the third movie, which, Amy Steele was courted for the movie, right? And ended up not doing it. And I think she said later, look, I wish I would have done it.
And it's interesting, because I know that story. I don't know exactly if the disconnect was that she decided not to do the movie, so they scrapped the concept, or what. That sounds like it would fit, because it was supposed to be very similar to another sequel that came out in 1982, where after the events of this movie, she was taken to a hospital, and Jason comes to the hospital and starts killing people, right?
Yeah. Yes. So, look, I mean, had she come back, we probably would have had an entirely different story. Although, as we know, the players may change, but the game stays the same, as they say in these movies. And somehow, I think we wouldn't have deviated that far from what we ended up getting in this movie. But I've always loved Amy Steele, so any movie she's in automatically gets an uptick, I think.
Oh yeah. It was nice to see that they brought her, and I loved it in the opening credits. I think it was the opening credits. They credit Amy Steele and all the other people from that last scene of Friday the 13th Part 2 as returning players or special appearance by or something like that. It's very strange.
Yeah.
But yeah. So as far as the movie that we got, it is directed by Steve Miner again, which I don't think I realized or remembered that he directed both of these kind of back to back. And it is strange because it still kind of feels like it's in line with Part 2, but there's something I never realized how important the scenery change is from, was it Connecticut to California, until you mentioned that. You dropped that bug in my brain, and now I'm watching Part 3 for like the 10th time in my life, and I'm watching it a completely different way. It just feels so dusty and dry. I mean, there's greenery kind of, but there's also just got a sort of an orange palette that doesn't match the first two movies at all.
Yeah, I mean, they had to was shot in California, of course, and so the question immediately becomes one of, why was it shot in California? Why, when we're talking about up to this point, which has been an East Coast kids camp, it's obviously kind of hills and greenery of Connecticut and New Jersey and the whole bit. Why transplant the movie? Why mess with the formula and move it over to California? Now, we now know it never went back to the East Coast, I think, after it went to California, but it was always just a matter of, in this case, function. I mean, all of the 3D effects artists at the time were on the West Coast, and so it just was impossible for them to shoot the movie and have those guys on set, and they were on set with that sort of expertise and bring them across the country. This was such a low-budget movie that the thought of flying people all over the place was not going to be done. Even Steve Dash, who played Jason in the second movie, as we know, at least the majority of the Jason scenes, really wanted the role in the third film, and they told Steve, look, you can hightail it over to California, but you got to buy your own airline ticket, and he was fundamentally opposed to paying for his own airfare to come to California, so he opted himself out for the role for the most part, and so the movie was all made in California because it was on the cheap, and they needed people that were regional.
Wow. I don't think I knew that story, because I know that they brought in Richard Brooker to play Jason. And it is strange especially because it opens with that scene from Friday the 13th Part 2. And Jason is like Steve Dash, and I guess to a certain extent Warrington Gillette, from what we saw in that last scene, were more slender Jasons. They were still imposing presences, but you got the feeling that they weren't like these hulking big guys like Richard Brooker appears, and part of that was makeup because they gave Jason a bit of a almost like a hunchback in some scenes. But that must have been a wild night where he transitioned from wearing those overalls and plaid long sleeve shirt to that weird like gas station mechanic outfit that he had on.
Yeah, image consultant. I mean, that's what happened, right? You just killed 15 people. You've got to go incognito in some way. So that was, I guess, the way of doing it, right?
That's what happened. He drug Ginny through the window, and she took him shopping.
That's what it was. Or maybe it was actually 13 people if you buy your premise that, the ending of the movie was a dream or whatever the case is. But, definitely a makeover. And it's a very interesting character, which sounds funny when you think about it, because it's a non-character. The entire modus operandi for the character was to be a non-character and just be like this unstoppable force, right? But there was obviously, as the movies went on, an evolution of Jason from movie to movie, and moviegoers didn't seem to care. I mean, we'd move from the second to the third to the fifth to the seventh, and Jason didn't have to look the same. He didn't have to have the same hunchback you talked about. He didn't have to have the same makeup on his face, and that seemed to change with every different makeup effects artist in a way. And we always sort of bought him as Jason because somehow it didn't really matter, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is that growing up, because I saw these movies all out of order, I just always accepted the idea of Jason as like a zombie, like he was in the later films. But for the first 4 movies, I'm pretty sure he's just alive somehow. Even in this film with Chris and her bizarre flashback story to 2 years earlier, encountering Jason at Camp Crystal Lake, he's just this thing living in the woods that happened upon her while she was sleeping, under a tree in the middle of the night and attacked her. And apparently there was I don't know if it was a bit of dialogue or something that was just left to the viewer's imagination about how she blacked out and she didn't know what happened. And I guess the implication was that he may have molested her or something.
No, I mean, Dana Kimmel is probably the best person to talk about this whole thing because she has opinions on all of it. And she, as has been reported on the set of the movie, made suggestions to amend certain things that had happened. And as far as that particular thing goes, what happened between Chris and Jason, Dana Kimmel inquired at a certain point to whether it was Steve Miner or Frank Mancuso or whoever, what actually happened 2 years ago? And nobody really would say what it was because really nobody knew. But I think the worst thing we could think of is probably the thing that happened or the best thing that could have happened. And as we see in the movie, I mean, she just gets dragged around a little bit by her ankles or whatever the case is. And so Dana Kimmel, as were lots of people in the cast, left with a lot of questions about these characters, including Paul Kratka, who played Rick as well. He said at one point to Steve Miner, look, can we do another take? I think it'd be better another take. And he said, look, this is Friday the 13th. This stuff doesn't matter. And so everybody was just sort of doing what needed to be done in the moment, of course, which we might talk about, that extended to the creation of the screenplay, which was just, I think the modus operandi for the screenplay was, look, it's set on a farm. What are the 10 ways that people can be killed on a farm? Incorporate all those things into the movie, and then we've got the movie.
That's very utilitarian. I like that. But it seems strange. It's a Friday the 13th movie, and this film had 2 screenwriters, Martin Kitrosser and Carol Watson. Carol Watson, who wrote, I guess, Meatballs 2, which is another camp movie, and she did something else that was strange. I've got it right here. Oh, she wrote on South Park back in the late 90s. Very, very odd career there. Oh, and also, I guess, part 4 of the final chapter, which we'll get to. But as far as this just being a Friday the 13th movie, it seems like there's some weird extra dimensions that you didn't need to include in the story because they just have these head-scratching moments. Like the fact that Jason encounters a girl in the woods and doesn't kill her, but just drags her around. Like, why would he leave her alive? I mean, I know we haven't gotten to the later movies yet, but we've only ever seen him really let small children go.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of a dangling plot thread that's never really explained. And it's not really sufficient to say, and here I want to fully recognize to everybody who's watching that we're trying to apply, logic and real world principles to Friday the 13th, Part 3 and 3D. But it is a dangling plot thread that vicious killer, as we know, who's indiscriminate in terms of who or how he kills, would just decide to walk away from that. I mean, certainly she was outmatched.
Yeah, it's just an odd choice, especially because this version of Jason is that we see particularly later in the movie. Partially, I think it's just based on his performance. He looks more ghoulish and more sinister instead of just this deformed woodland, kind of hillbilly. He looks like a real monster.
Yeah.
And there's something about the way that he looks at Chris, particularly in the end where his mask comes up and you see under his face. He's like grinning at her, like, remember me?
Yes, right. I mean, so that's a very strange sort of thing. I like that observation. In the second film, as we know, Jason is kind of, as you said, a deformed hillbilly or whatever you want to call him, and he's got the kind of carriage of like a kind of high school wrestler. Maybe he kind of the way Steve Dash plays him, he just kind of skulks around a little bit, and he's kind of stocky and shorter, right? And in this performance by Richard Brooker. I mean, he looks about 7 feet tall in the movie, which we know he wasn't in real life. But there's something so, as you said, ghoulish and imposing about him, and almost as if he's enjoying what he's doing in a way. That it's a cat and mouse game by the end of it, and that moment where he raises the mask and smiles at her, which is kind of a gotcha moment. And really, I remember seeing that the first time. I thought that was absolutely chilling. When I must have been 12 or 13 years old. Maybe I was 15. But he is having a little bit of fun. And I think that's interesting. We don't often think of Jason as having fun. We might think of Freddy Krueger as having some fun. But Jason has always been a little more on the skulking, indiscriminate side of Michael Myers than on the Freddy Krueger side. And so it's an anomaly of a moment.
Yeah, and this is also, well, first I want to posit a theory. And, I'm all about the theories on this show, giving these movies way more credit and analysis than they perhaps deserve. But I'm also talking to a serious film critic here who's also a fan, so why not? Right?
Luke. Yes.
In Friday the 13th, Part 1, we only see Jason as the little boy drowned in the lake. But we are led to believe in the sequels, perhaps it's a retcon, that he had survived that somehow, was living in the woods. But the only image of Jason really have is the little boy drowned in the lake who comes back up. It is Alice's perception or her idea of what Jason would be at the end of this horrible nightmare. In Part 2, we see Jason as this woodland hillbilly living off the land. Again, it's the mental image of what Ginny imagines he would be. In Part 3, we get Jason as this hulking monster, which is what Chris perhaps imagined he would look like or act like, having attacked her in the woods. She didn't know exactly what she saw, but she was already in a state of distress because she had been in a horrible fight with her mother. So I just wonder if there's like this weird underlying thing where Jason is almost like the boogeyman, almost like a Freddy Krueger. Like he brings a certain level of psychic malevolence based on your perception of him.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty cool. So basically you could he could be the manifestation of however you perceive evil to be, in a way, or whatever you feel most threatened by. And that's very interesting. I had never thought of that before, but I don't mind this theory.
Oh, all right. So I've made up for my ending of Part 2 theory then.
We're getting there. Yeah.
Okay. I'll take it. What was I going to talk about? I don't remember. I had another point, but I've lost it.
Yeah.
So,
well,
go ahead.
Hey, I mean, let's start with the beginning of the movie. I mean, like here we've got some pretty funky stuff happening right up front in this movie. I mean, we all have got to love the disco-themed Harry Manfredini version of the Friday the 13th score. I mean, that's something new. I mean, as Frank Mancuso Jr. said when he started out on this movie, look, we're on the third movie now. I mean, essentially he's saying we've got a commodity here. We know what the movie is. In order to make it fresh, we've got to do something different. And so right out of the gate, we know we've got 3D, of course, which was the novelty to make this entire project different, but we've got that funny disco score. I don't know if I ever thought that was cool at the time, but somehow it seems really funny right now, and definitely sets this movie apart from the other ones, right?
It does, and I always thought it was kind of cheesy, again, until I watched it this time. Like, oh, it's fun, and it's got the cool 3D lettering coming out of the blue smoke. I mean, it's totally wild,
Yeah.
and unlike anything that we've really seen before. And it feels like maybe it has something to do with that California connection. All these kids seem more like, I don't know, more teen soap drama-y, this cast of characters that we're dealing with, and I feel like this movie really sets the stage for what we're going to get.
Yeah, I mean it is, and this is a little bit of a different movie. It's more of an upbeat vacation movie. You know, everybody's going off to have fun. You know, not that the counselors in the first two movies were trying to have fun when they weren't not fulfilling their duties of preparing the camps, but this is a movie that's let's all get together in a van and let's go rolling down, somewhere along the Pacific coast and hang out and have a good time. And I think the movie has that kind of upbeat quality about it, and that it's upbeat in the music as well. I mean, this is the only one of the movies where I think everybody gets in a van and smokes pot at the beginning of the movie, and which was actually what it was, oregano, I think they said.
Well, I hope so, because I had to eat it.
So it's a little bit of a different movie. I mean, they departed in the screenplay from sticking to that whole idea of a summer camp, and now we're just going out to have a good time. And I think the music reflects that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because for this movie and the next one, we do get away from the camp counselor aspect. I mean, the first movie was people going to reopen a camp. The second one, it was counselors in training. And this, 3 and 4 are just people hanging out, at Camp Blood, essentially, or nearby. Higgins Haven is the name of this community. It's weird, though, because this all does happen the day after part 2. And then part 4 takes place the day after part 3. And there's a weird continuity issue that we'll get into in the next movie. You probably know what I'm talking about. But it's all just wild, because this is technically Saturday the 14th, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. So I don't know if we're ever supposed to take on faith that it's Friday the 13th. I mean, I know in the first one we are, because it says Friday the 13th on the screen, right? But I'm not sure if we're just supposed to take a leap of faith in the other ones. But nonetheless, there is a continuity issue. I want to ask you what you think about the extended sequence at the beginning of the movie between Harold and Edna, with two actors, Steve Susskind and Cheryl Magus, who are trying really hard to outgross each other and be probably the most disgusting people alive in any of these movies. And truth be told, every time that sequence is on, I fast forward past it and start right after it finishes. There's something about that sequence, it seems to me, it tells me maybe it's that it looks so artificial. Maybe it's that the 3D technique has given the film a different quality and it looks artificial. But something about this movie immediately departs from what I would call the real world concerns or environment of the first two movies, and we're in a totally artificial place. It's clear to us that we're suddenly on a set. There's something static about it. There's something very plastic about it, or not real. And again, we're talking about characters in a Friday the 13th movie, but I think we are a notch down the ladder with these two characters. And I think there's a static quality that extends throughout the rest of the movie, which we'll get to. But that sequence at the beginning, I don't know how they overcame it, but they did.
I wonder if that was just a way of getting away from formula. You could just have the kids pulling into camp and being stalked and sliced up. But I think having some adult characters, even if they are complete sleazebags, sort of encounter Jason at the beginning, it gives us an excuse to have people listening to the news reports, so you get context for what... Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I got a Facebook message coming up on my screen, so I'm like, just go away. No. But okay, they're watching a news report based on what happened at Camp Blood the night before, and the woman is sufficiently horrified, but she doesn't go and tell her husband, maybe we should lock the doors because this just happened right up the road, that kind of thing.
Everybody always watches the news in these movies, like horrified watching the news. I mean, it's not just in Friday the 13th, it's in the Halloween franchise, but everybody's windows and doors are wide open, right?
Oh, and we'll get to that later, because Higgins Haven has the worst door and window latches ever. They can't withstand a light breeze. They're just flapping all over the place. But there is, I agree, it's a weird way to open the movie, but I do kind of like it, just because there is that stalkerish aspect to it, where you think Jason's going to attack like 2 or 3 different times before he actually strikes. You see him, standing behind the laundry billowing in the breeze. There's the fake out with him hanging out in whatever those closets are before he stabs the guy. In terms of being gross, like, yeah, the dude sits on a toilet, which it's hard to tell if it's outside or inside, and he's pulling up a thing of Jack Daniels right next to it and reading magazines.
That store and putting it back in the,
Oh, and also this began the trend, at least in this movie, of people going to the bathroom and not even trying to wipe or clean up after themselves.
Yes.
I mean,
we will see that happen again in part 5. We know.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think Jason kills people if you smoke dope, have premarital sex, or don't, clean up after yourself from, relieving your.
Gotta wash your hands, as we know, right? So.
Jason Voorhees, the original coronavirus. I love it.
Oh, it is right. Was there hand sanitizer in the early 80s? Was that a thing even? I don't remember hand sanitizer being a thing.
I don't know. That's a great question.
I don't think you were around in the early 80s. I was around in the early 80s, but
I was around. I was just barely sentient. That's the.
There you go.
I was 5 years old when this movie came out.
There you go. You still could have snuck in. So look, I want to note that Sherry Meagans, who plays Edna in the movie, is quite interesting and funny. When she talks about this movie, she says, "Look, I wanted to be Meryl Streep." I mean, that's her line. She said, "That's what I wanted. I wanted that for my career, but I took this role and I tried to imagine that this was a woman whose life went the wrong way. She was a popular cheerleader and she got tied down with a loser husband, and this is what her life kind of became." She went in to audition for this movie with Steve Miner, actually as a method kind of audition, just as we see her here. She came in with curlers in her hair, bathrobe, and slippers and the whole bit. And then she said that she and Steve Miner laughed all the way through the audition, and then he hired her. So she was really committed. She said she wanted to take this. This is the Meryl Streep method performance of the Friday the 13th movies.
All right.
That's good. Hey, we're tossing theories around here, so.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing. Her death always kind of bugged me because maybe it's one of those things you had to see it in 3D in a theater, because I know the knitting needle, he jabs it through the back of her head. He's got his hand around her mouth and it comes through his fingers and out her mouth. Yeah. But it's shot from such a straight on angle that it's hard to tell that it's actually coming out of her mouth. Yes. I didn't really pick up on it until watching it this week.
Or is it coming through his fingers also? I'm trying to remember the shot exactly.
I think he's got his hand over her mouth. He shoves the thing in between the fingers, and I think I don't know if you see it coming out of her mouth really. It's just something obscuring it.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite work.
Yeah. We should also note, and we'll talk about this as well, this is the movie where we started to repeat methods of death. We've got a couple of repeats in here, right?
Yeah, and I guess they figured they could get away with that because it's 3D, so it's totally different,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's different enough. I mean that it's a knitting needle through the back of the head rather than an ice pick through the temple. It's a butcher knife through the chest rather than a spear through the floor, the bed.
The method of impaling is what's different. Yeah.
Well, and also the victim, because let's talk about our pregnant teen character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if they were trying to one-up themselves. They killed a guy in a wheelchair in the last movie, so it's like, okay, wait, how can we make this crazy and radical 3D? Let's kill a pregnant teenager.
Imagine like what hashtags would be started today if they did this.
It would.
I'm not asking you what they are because we could probably guess, but this would not fly today. None of this stuff.
Well, I think it depends, because you might be able to get away with it depending on your thoughts on whether or not, like, when does life begin and all that stuff.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. So it could go either way. Yeah. It's oh no. Disavow.
I think you turn comments off for this one when you post it. So.
I'm gonna have to. No. So but okay, so these fun-loving kids, they go to we meet them. They're in a van because we have to have the driving into town scene. But they go to pick up a girl named Vera, and she's kind of everyone's paired off except for her, and these teens bring a kid named Shelley, played memorably by Larry Zerner, as her prospective date, and he's a kind of a fat, dorky loser, sort of well, I mean, but like self-admittedly, I mean, he makes jokes and he's self-deprecating to a fault, and he's also a prankster and a aspiring makeup effects artist, which is a theme that we'll see next time.
In the box, remember, his whole world is in the box. But if you were Vera and we all showed up on your porch and everybody was paired off, and this was the guy who was to be paired off with you,
yeah.
Would you follow your mother's advice and go back in the house?
It would be life-saving advice for sure.
Catherine Park, who's was a Miss Florida. I mean, she competed in Miss America. I mean, and she's getting paired off with Larry Zerner. No offense to Larry Zerner, a cool guy who's on the convention circuit, but it was a little bit of an opposites, maybe attract or don't, because we had a super hot couple, we had a kind of sporty couple, a preppy sporty couple, and then we had this weird couple, and then of course we had the Cheech and Chong couple.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what really fascinated me about the dynamics in this movie is I feel like you could have had a touching teen coming of age story, kind of, if you'd taken out all the slasher stuff, because I felt like Shelley and Vera were really getting to the verge of some kind of an understanding. Like later on in the movie, he pulls like so many pranks during this thing, really horrifying stunts too. But she's like, "Look, I'm going to go outside for a bit, and then we can talk." Yeah. And at that point, he calls her a bitch under his breath, which I don't think I'd caught or I'd at least forgotten. It's so, mean, and I guess it's in character, but I was really kind of bummed because I was on Shelley's side up until that point. But I feel like if he had not pulled that last prank, jumping out of the water, she might have been able to talk to him about like, "Look, you're a great guy. Nothing's going to happen this weekend, but let's see where this goes after this weekend."
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, Larry Zerner said that line where he calls her a bitch came from Larry Zerner, that it wasn't in the script, and he just said it in the moment. And Steve Miner and others on the crew thought it was a funny moment, and everybody laughed, and that's how it ended up staying in the movie. So that came from him. But yeah, I forget what your last point was.
That if all the horrifying events hadn't happened, that maybe they could have worked something out, or at least been friends, and something could have happened, later on, because she really did seem like a good person. I mean, when she drops his wallet into the water, before that moment, she's flipping through it. She sees a picture of, I guess, Shelley and probably his mom, and she seemed really kind of endeared by that. Mm-hmm. And then when she went to get the wallet, she's like, "Oh, I dropped your wallet. I'm sorry. I got it." And of course she gets knocked off, but she just seemed kind of like a sweet girl. She wasn't she was kind of disappointed when she first met Shelley, but they had their little adventure at the convenience store where he showed that he could kind of, I guess, man up and take on some corrupt bikers.
Yes.
So there was something there that she could work with, but they just never got a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I like her quite a bit in the movie. I think she's giving the best performance maybe in the movie, which is not a knock on anybody else, but as Steve Miner says now, when he looks back on the movie, he says, "Look, performances weren't that good and lots of other things weren't right. We focused probably way too much just on the 3D and not on the rest of it." But somehow Catherine Park manages to be sympathetic in the movie, but she also does a thing which is going to sound like a miracle in this movie. She says her lines convincingly and with some kind of conviction on the porch with her mother when she even when she talks to Jason, when she says, "Wait a minute, that's not funny to point the spear gun like that." I mean, this is not a bad actress. It's a pretty good actress. And I wouldn't have minded seeing her in a lead role in one of these movies.
Yeah, and the scene in the convenience store where she gets accosted by the biker lady, and she's like, "May I please have the wallet, ma'am?" That was a great line. I mean, again, you take the Jason part out of this, you've got something not Oscar-worthy, sure, but like you said, a really good performance.
Yeah, you got an ABC after-school special or something
about manners and washing your hands.
You know, there's just so many things to talk about here. We should really say that for people who don't know, the 3D process, almost toppled this movie because the amount of duress that the crew was under to produce these 3D effects and not only produce them but bring them to market. I mean, the special projection systems all over the country, this was going to open on 2,000 screens. It wasn't just a couple of screens, and the screens needed to be what were called silver screens, so they had to outfit all the theaters for it. And the shooting of the effects, the creating of the effects, was where all the creative energies went into, and they were shooting most of the movie at night. So oftentimes they were starting at 4 or 5 o'clock, not finishing until 6 o'clock in the morning. And Steve Miner, as some would say, including the assistant director on the movie, would say, look, this was still a young director who was figuring things out, and the whole technical process really at a certain point got so far away from them. It was such an element to focus that it was really taxing on everybody, not the least of which was the actors as well, who couldn't get a lot of acting direction at all from Steve Miner, who just told them, as I said earlier, look, you're in a Friday the 13th movie, and that's what it is. And so this is not going to be about motivation, as Richard Brooker said. I knew better than to ask what would be the character's motivation and so forth. And so this was a pretty stressful movie all around for everybody, and made for almost no money on a non-union crew for $2.2 million, and ended up making a lot of money, the second highest grossing Friday the 13th movie at the time. I think it was $36.1 million or something in that neighborhood. So they made quite a killing on it, but it took a lot out of them, especially the crew members and the producers who were counting the days until the shoot was over, simply because the technical concerns of it were so tricky. They built that set themselves as well. So that whole building that we see, which ended up being a set for other movies post that as well. I think Walter Hill used that set in that area. And that lake that was there, which the cast members have joked was not bigger than a room, even though it was a little bit bigger than that, was a man-made lake as well. So the logistical concerns that came along with being a movie that was more overseen by Paramount than the first two movies had been, because they knew they had something at this point, it was pretty tricky.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The relationship with Paramount and these movies has always fascinated me, because they were big money makers, but they were just kind of ashamed of them, I think, especially as they go on. Now, I might understand being ashamed of Part 5, but it's kind of because it's like ultra trashy.
Oh, but it's great.
Oh yeah, I'm no argument there. But wow. But as far as this movie, it doesn't feel like there was a lot of corporate meddling or anything. I can understand how getting obsessed with the 3D effects could take focus away from other aspects of the movie. Like Chuck, I think the hippie.
Yeah.
Was that just a reaction to the Cheech and Chong craze of the early '80s? What was that about?
Yes, I mean, he was encouraged to play that character that way, and that's what he did. It's interesting if you read the book Crystal Lake Memories, Peter Brackey's book, and you see some of the comments from him, Paul Kratka, and others. There's a tinge of bitterness in their thoughts and recollections on this movie. He said, look, there was really no direction at all, and this was, grueling for us, and, we were just told to act a certain way or whatever, and it really became up to us as actors to take the initiative in the scene to try to come up with something that made any kind of sense at all. And so I think those two characters, Chuck and Chili, I think the other character's name is, were just, they're really non-characters in the movie. I mean, they're there as comic relief, and they walk in and out of the movie a couple times, and then they're killed. I mean, the kill of the character of Chili, as Richard Brooker would say, was one of the most grueling days of the shoot. It took 36 times of poking that poker at her to get that 3D effect right. And so when we talk about the 3D effects and why they were so difficult, they really were things like that, like putting the actors through the paces to get those effects.
What was it about the poker scene? Because it just kind of comes out right at the camera, and then we see it go through her back, but like 36 times?
36 times of that split-second shot right before it goes through her, where it comes at her. And so I don't know why. I mean, I think it was the camera technique. It was, a different way of shooting, to build special cameras for this and so forth. And they just weren't really technically up to it. They were sorting it all out, and that was a lot to put the actors through.
One thing I want to rewind just a little bit. We have a 3D, a Crazy Ralph style character in this movie that the kids encounter on their way to Higgins Haven. He has an eyeball. I can't tell if that's supposed to be like a human eye or a goat eye or what, but he's saying that someone gave this to me as a warning to let everybody know to beware or something like that.
Yeah.
Did Jason talk to him, or is he just a crazy who found some eyeball hanging out somewhere?
I don't know. I mean, I got the impression I always just wrote those characters off, like that one in Crazy Ralph as being, you know, the town crazies who are steeped in legend and lore and the whole bit, and you know. But this guy's particularly crazy. Now I know they used a sheep eyeball for that scene. At least they said they did. Now I don't know whether Jason, in one of his kinder moments, as he did with Chris 2 years earlier, sat down with the guy and kind of explained to him, "Look, I want to get this."
That's honestly what I was thinking, though. Like, because he's talking about someone had given this to him along with the warning. I'm like, is Jason having conversations now? What was that like?
I don't know. I mean, there's a whole movie to be made there. There really is.
And as far as we know, this guy survived. He should have been, you know, hanging around. Ooh, I wonder, could he have become the Crystal Lake Cemetery caretaker that we see in part 6?
I feel another theory coming on. I can feel.
I got my notebook ready.
Look, I wanted to mention also, because you talked about the screenwriters, they weren't really happy with the screenplay that Mario Petrosser and Carol, his wife Carol, had written, and so they built upon it, and they hired a kid from AFI, and his name is Pedro Popescu, and he was a Romanian student studying in the United States and a very young fledgling screenwriter. And they said, look, you know, why don't you try to brush this up? So of course he did his homework on every horror film in the world, and you know, I think you know, we talked about Dial M for Murder, and you know, all kinds of horror films he did as develop his acumen for this. And he said, look, this was about not characters, only slashings. That's what Steve Miner told him. So not to worry about the characters at all, and only think about the slashings, which I thought was kind of fun and interesting. Maybe as a screenwriter, that's liberating, because you don't have to do the work of writing a character in the movie. And he said, in fact, there weren't any characters in the movie as far as he was concerned, only those slashings. Now, when the movie screened, and he said that with his agent, the agent said, you better take your name off this movie. You don't want your name on it. And his name had been on it, and he had his name taken off it. And then he went on to write other movies and so forth. But this was a brush-up job by a young Romanian guy from AFI, who just took the screenplay and put a lot of stuff in it, like some of the methods of killing and so forth came from him. And so it was interesting. I think there were a total of 4 screenwriters on it, but he was the final one.
I had no idea about that. See, this is the thing. I listened to the Crystal Lake Memories documentary that they put out. I have the book. Yeah. I mistakenly assumed that the book was pretty well translated to the documentary, but it seems like there's relatively nothing in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff there. And if you dig into the commentaries and so forth on the DVDs versus the Blu-rays and back and forth, you can get some really interesting stuff. On the DVD commentary for this movie, it's Dana Kimmel, it's Peter Bracke moderating it, it's Paul Kratka, it's Richard Brooker and Larry Zerner. They're all actually together, and that's kind of a novel thing, because sometimes, as you know, when you look at the Crystal Lake Memories documentary, there are individual talking head interviews that are coherently strung together by movie, right? But they're almost non sequiturs in a way, the way they're put together. But this was actually the 4 of them sitting down and watching the movie, and they hadn't seen each other in over 20 years. And so it was a lot of fun to listen to them talk about all this stuff as the scenes were sort of rolling along. And so there's just so much information out there. It's in a bunch of different places, though.
Yeah, I think I listened to that during, because I know they put out a few different sets over the years. I think I listened to the DVD commentary, like all of them on that set, but that was, you know, more than 10 years ago. It's funny that especially a young Romanian aspiring screenwriter would accept his agent's advice to take his name off of Friday the 13th Part 3, because, yeah, he might not have been proud of the work, but it's still having your name on a blockbuster sequel of a proven successful franchise. I don't know what kind of doors that opens, but it's at least something you can say, yeah, that movie that made $36 million, that was partially me.
Yeah, well, you know, you're actually touching on something that I think is really interesting to think about. And time and time again with this movie, from Larry Zerner to Paul Kratka to Dana Kimmel to lots of others who were involved with it, they had said, look, at the beginning of pre-production, before we were ever hired for the movie, in many cases, even in the case of Tracy Savage, auditioning for the movie was like anonymously auditioning for a horror film from a franchise, etc. But I think they all said, look, I didn't really watch those kind of movies. So I didn't really know what I was going to be getting into. So, my agent said, look, if you're going to take this part, you go back and watch the two movies prior. You've got to watch the two. So everybody kind of, in a very gently offhand way, disavows certain elements of their participation in the movie. And it's quite interesting. They're backhanded compliments is what they are. And in fact, in the cases of a lot of these people, it's the highest grossing thing that they ever did. And so it is their calling card. And as you know, now, in retrospect, they do conventions, and it's what they're known for. But at the time, they were very cautious about the effect that a movie like this would have on their career. It was not a secret in the industry that these movies had been critically reviled in a way, and there were very public campaigns going on to take down these movies. And other movies of this kind, as you know, were picketed. Movies like Silent Night, Deadly Night, I Spit on Your Grave. And I'm certainly not saying that Friday the 13th Part 3 is equivalent in any way to something that's as hyper awful as I Spit on Your Grave. But to be involved in a horror franchise like this, when you, as we heard earlier, wanted to be the next Meryl Streep, you might be given pause with your name on it, even though you might walk away with a $40,000 payday.
Yeah, I guess I'm making the mistake of looking back at this with the modern, kind of perspective, knowing that it's a 40-year-old thing that people are still talking about today and kind of celebrating a lot of circles. So yeah, I guess back at the time, if you're 22 and looking to make something of yourself, I mean, look at Kevin Bacon, Brad Pitt. They all a lot of people started in these kind of low budget slasher movies, but they didn't know if anything was going to come of it or if it might be seen as an embarrassment. So yeah, that's fair. But the other point I wanted to say is that for a movie whose mandate was this isn't about characters, it's about kills, I think as we've already established, there's at least one set of character dynamics that is really more effective than it had any right to be, and that's Shelley and Vera.
Yeah, because they're both good, right? I mean, they're both good actors, and I think sometimes you have a real job to do in a movie like this, and it can be a very hard job because you're going to do something that's going to feel very autonomous as an actor, because you're not going to get the level of expertise or support you're going to get from, for example, Spielberg. You're not getting that, who was at the height of his career at that time as well. You're not going to be getting a screenplay that's going to give you very many opportunities to say or do anything that has substance to it, and you're not going to get a lot of attention if you need help on the set or you have questions for what the best route is to do something. And so I think if you're an actor who wants to come out of this not just unscathed, but you want to create something or you want to have some kind of moment, you need to find those things, and you need to find them yourself. They might not be in the dialogue. They might be in the relationship between the actors, and that, as we talk about with Catherine Park and Larry Zerner, and without overselling it, I mean, a couple of scenes together, they are able to create that. And sometimes, you know as well as I do, when you interview people that have been in movies, they'll tell you, look, the two of us as actors became good friends. We worked on this ourselves in our spare time. We created this communication and dynamic together that we wanted to have on screen, and we're glad you could see it. But I think if you're a smart actor in a movie like this, you want to find those moments where you can do something that's not on the page and that you're not going to be guided toward doing.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I want to talk about, and it has to do sort of with the 3D effects, but also with the performance by Dana Kimmel. There's a scene where she's fighting against Jason. It's the point where she's the only one left, right? And she comes out slashing, and she's coming at the camera, and she's pursuing him. I don't remember that scene ever. I think I was probably just thinking about other stuff, the other half dozen times that I watched this movie, or maybe I'd zoned out because like, oh, this is just the chase scene towards the end that it's in all these movies. Yeah. But yeah, watching it this time, it's really effective. I mean, I felt like she was coming after me.
Yeah, she's almost looking into the camera. I mean, I think he's probably very close to the camera. And that culminates in the knife being buried in Jason's thigh, I think. So that's a kind of a victorious moment for her. I guess there are those moments in all the movies, but she puts a lot into that moment. And Dana Kimmel is probably in the mid-range somewhere of, in my view, effective Friday the 13th heroines. And I think she's been given a kind of threadbare role for the most part, and she's decent in it. And she was good in other movies too, like Sweet 16. Before that, with Bo Hopkins, she was in. But she does have fiery moments in this movie, and the majority of those moments are not in the courtship between her and Paul Crackhead. They're in the courtship between her and Jason in the final third of it. And some of those scenes I really love, like where she gets the van stuck in the bridge. I think she does a great job in that sequence. And pretty much throughout. I mean, also she's great to look at. That's important. And as was said in the making of this movie, I forget who said this. It might have been that Romanian screenwriter said, look, there were lots of actors who came through the audition calls, and some were good and some were not, and it was irrelevant who was good and who was not. It was about how they looked and who fit the part and who lined up into those couple categories we talked about earlier when we talked about lining up the couples to look good together and have whatever chemistry they had together. So it wasn't so much about talent. I think, and this is not a knock on Dana Kimmel, I think she looks the part, and she's a great looking heroine.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'll agree with your assessment that she's sort of, she's not a top tier final girl. She definitely has one of the more interesting fates, I think, of the final girls that we see in these movies, which is that she essentially goes insane. I mean, yeah. She has the same kind of exit scene that Amy Steele had, but Amy Steele was just kind of yelling for Paul, and we still don't know what happened to him. But Dana Kimmel's character, she's screaming, and then she starts laughing, and then she just kind of goes catatonic as the cops are dragging her away.
Yeah, we talked last time about the different qualities of the final girls in these movies, and we said that we had the girl next door, Alice, Adrienne King, who was this vision of like nice girl 70s, even if maybe we didn't believe the character was virginal, which is kind of a staple of a lot of these types of movies. We thought she was the kind-hearted, good person, right? She had good morals and values and was plucky and smart. We had Amy Steele in the second one, who was athletic, smart, very smart, as a matter of fact, and applied psychology to it. So she was not only athletic, but she was super brainy and had a visceral quality about her. And the athleticism of her version of the final girl really went a long way in those chases at the end of the movie, and the chainsaw confrontation and lots of other moments. And if we looked at what defines Dana Kimmel in this movie, I'm not sure what exactly sets her apart. There is some quality of beauty queen with a little bit of a prudish edge about her. She's not necessarily somebody that you could call sexed up in any way. As a matter of fact, as the story goes, Dana Kimmel requested that Steve Miner remove reference in the story to she and the character of Rick making love, as it said in the screenplay, as they are out in the woods together. She didn't think it was the right message for young girls. So she's not that type of character. She's not Alice, and she's not Ginny. I'm not sure where that places her. I know what I can tell you about the next two we're going to talk about in the next two movies, but Dana Kimmel's in some gray area in the movie. I don't know what kind of final girl she is.
I don't know either, but part of the problem, and I have the same kind of an issue for me, there's just some kind of an indefinable quality about her that when I think of the final girls in this series, she's always like the last one I remember. But I think it's partially because my first experience with her, I think my only one really outside of this movie, was she was on, I think, The Facts of Life as a guest character, a recurring character. And I remember seeing her, I don't know if that was after this or before this, because I didn't see this movie until, I didn't watch it when I was 5, obviously. But there's something I can't stop thinking about her as the Facts of Life character going to this summer camp. And it's just very weird.
Going to summer camp. She's a nice lady. She does the convention circuit as well. And it's a really good sport about all this, like all of the final girls who do the conventions are. Sometime we'll get into that. We'll talk about the whole fan base and the convention dynamic and so forth. And so, yeah, she's just sort of her own person in this movie. She doesn't fit a particular stereotype or easily definable type, I guess you would call it, and she's interesting. She does make me laugh in the movie several times. I think there's something about her that can seem a little uptight and prudish, and I think that's in the character of Chris in a way. And they have some very funny laughs in this movie. Like, for example, at the beginning of the movie when they're all riding in the van down the highway and they happen to look at the fracas going on the side of the road with the police and what's been happening. And she's driving down kind of this steep road, but she puts her entire head out the window, as you know, for a good several seconds, takes her eyes off the road. There's something very charming and funny about that. And I think she's like that throughout. And so she's fun.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Really, I'm like, because she's up on a ridge. I'm like, that's more dangerous than encountering Jason in a lot of ways. But one thing I want to touch on, there's a great. We sort of talked about the biker gang, but their bikes get trashed by Shelley in the parking lot of this convenience store. They follow these kids back to their farmhouse. And while the kids are all off doing, whatever, skinny dipping or wherever they go, these bikers siphon the gas from the van. And I had never noticed it before, but they're like, okay, go start spreading this around in the barn. We're going to light it up. I'm like, they were going to burn down that farm in retribution. They weren't messing around. But they encounter Jason and things don't go so well for them. The last dude, the bald-headed biker guy, the leader of the group.
Yeah.
Jason comes after him with a machete. I don't understand what happens in this scene because Jason gets the better of him and he stands there like hacking at him repeatedly, like at least 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And yet at the end, when Chris is in the barn facing off against Jason, this guy pops up almost like he'd been like laying in the hay the entire time. Then he gets his arm cut off. Yeah. And then Jason like stabs him again. Like, how did he what happened? What's your theory?
Well, he knocks him down, right, when he first encounters him in the barn. He somehow knocks him down, and then I don't really know what he was chopping, because when we meet this guy again, Ali, I guess is his name, he looks pretty good. I mean, he's steps up to the plate in the climax of the movie, and of course, then as we know, it gets even worse. But I'm not quite sure what was being chopped, but somehow it must have been the dull end of the machete,
We have established that Jason has a propensity for using the dull end. Yeah, but when he uses the dull end, it acts as a sharp end. So I don't know. I'm confused.
You know what? I mean, we already established he likes to keep people around sometimes. And so this might have been, just another case of that. So.
Wow, that's way more generous than I was willing to be.
We got to talk about the mask. I mean, because,
Yep.
This is the, here we go. And the iconic first time that we saw this mask, which, I mean, this became a legend at this moment. I mean, if you were Captain Park in that scene where you first see Jason with the mask on, you could forever say, look, I was the first person to ever be killed by the Jason with a hockey mask. It never changed back from there. It never went back. Something about that iconography stuck at that point, and that just became symbolic. I would argue that most people today, unless you're really a hockey fan and you see hockey masks all the time, when you see a hockey mask, you think of Jason. And of course, that came about accidentally. The special effects guy on the film had the hockey mask in his bag, duffel bag, and it was a Detroit Red Wings hockey mask, and they didn't have a makeup artist at that point to create what they were actually going to do. He pulled that mask out, and Steve Miner said, well, I really like that. We should go with that. And that's how the whole thing happened, to paraphrase the whole thing. But that's where that mask came from. It was sort of accidental. And then it just stuck. And now that is part of the lore. I mean, that is what it is. It's legendary.
It is. And I also love the way that Jason gets the mask and how we're introduced to it completely off screen. Yeah. It's almost like the filmmakers want us to think that it could be Shelley, but Vera gives it away because she says, hey, who are you? I always thought it'd be kind of a cruel little twist of the knife, no pun intended, if she just actually thought that was Shelley that killed her. Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said no to this guy.
I mean, I sort of always read it that way, that she did think that. Or that at least if she didn't think that, she never knew that it was not him.
Because she did say, who are you, when he comes out of the barn, because it takes a second.
Oh, she's holding up the right where she's, yeah.
But yeah, so, and this was another bit of, I guess, Jason's just really sloppy in this movie. He's letting people go all over the place because he slashes Shelley's neck, and maybe, no offense to overweight people, but maybe that's because there was a lot to cut through. Shelley is able to show up at the end with his throat all mangled, but, you know, of course, the stoner lady thinks that it's him just playing a prank. And that's just really sad because he makes it there, and I don't know what he was expecting. If did he just die, or did his heart give out because he was like, well, she's not going to call 911. I guess this is it.
I guess he was just right at the end of the rope at that moment. But, you know, you're right. I mean, Jason's killing in this movie. His heart really isn't in it as much as it has been. I mean, for God's sake, like, I mean, if you can't think of a more creative way to kill someone than throw them into a fuse box, I mean, that was, some of these are throwaways, right?
They are, and we'll see some of these kills again, you know, motifs repeated in later movies. But one thing I thought was cool about the mask that I don't know if this is maintained throughout the other movies, but there are actual metal bolts in part of it, not just in the sides keeping the straps on, but like in the front of the face. And when the light hits it just right, it kind of shines off. It creates this really cool, eerie gleam.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's effective. And we get another piece of the iconography later on where Chris hits Jason in the head with an axe, cracks the mask, creates that iconic slash with the blood.
Yeah. You can't be alive. You can't be alive. That whole sequence is great. Look, you know, I want to mention also I think the very best kills in the entire series is in this movie, and it's certainly the best one in this movie. And the most ingeniously mounted one, and that one is the death of the character of Andy, who has just a fantastic moment. I mean, now this actor, Jeffrey Rogers, who played Andy in the movie, who's kind of the all-American jock type character, who's kind of fun and a little bit goofy, is now a doctor in New York City, so he left acting and became a doctor, right? But in the movie, you know, he got the role because he could walk on his hands, and that's what he said. He said, look, you know, that was the prerequisite, so I had to learn to walk on my hands. And so, you know, he's always walking on his hands. Even when he was off camera, he was trying to perfect that walking on his hands for those couple of scenes where he was able to do that. In that particular shot, in the aftermath of that shot, where he's been essentially cut in two and then hung from the rafters above her, this is one of, in my view, the very best kills in the series, and certainly one of the most ingeniously staged ones, because what they did was they went under the house and they dug a hole, and they cut out part of the floor and put a piece of glass into the floor, and then they put the camera underneath the glass. And so whenever we're watching that, we always wonder, you know, how did they get the camera underneath the kind of glass floor that they built? This is a little beyond what you usually expect in the Friday the 13th franchise, because it's just a very quick and easy thing. A knife will do it, you know, so you don't have to go this far. But in this case, they basically put the camera underneath him, and that sequence, if you look at even the way it's edited, the walking on the hands, him looking up, which is, you know, he's upside down, so he's really looking at it. It's kind of disorienting in that moment, and the way that machete comes down, I mean, that's just a great moment.
Yeah, especially when he looks up and Jason, you can see him swinging. I mean, that's another kind of iconic shot. And the rafter part, I mean, it's funny because when... oh, why can't I think of her name? Tracy Savage, when she goes into the bedroom after taking a shower, she picks up an issue of Fangoria and she opens right to a spread on Tom Savini.
Great.
Just perfect. And the blood starts dripping down and she looks up. And this is one of the great things about high definition Blu-rays. You really get a good look at all the guts and everything hanging out. It's kind of draping in parts, which I'd never really noticed before. And just that, one thing I love about these movies, because I'm demented, is the dead characters with the open eyes. Just this idea that the life has just been sucked right out of them. Yeah, it's eerie. And then, of course, the knife coming through her chest was particularly brutal, not just because she's pregnant, but there was just it felt like an unusually huge knife, almost like cartoonishly big, coming up through her chest.
All the way through. And of course, you know, that's a repeat from the first movie, right? I mean, we saw that in the first one with Kevin Bacon, of course, his famous scene. And Tracy Savage in this one was underneath that hammock with the latex, neck on the hammock. And it was about 100 degrees or more in that room. And the latex was troubled. It wasn't looking like real flesh and so forth. But nonetheless, I mean, it certainly is a fun moment for all the reasons you mentioned, because of what we see above her, because of the magazine as well, and just because she's fun in the scene as well. I want to talk about her quickly. She was somebody who was a child star. She'd been in the movies for about 17 years before she was ever in this movie, which is hard to believe because she's only in her early 20s in this movie. Her mother was a casting agent in Los Angeles for child actors. And at this point, Tracy was pretty much done with her career. She was going to go off to school, and her mother said, look, there's a horror film shooting in the summertime. It might be fun for you to do it. You might want to think about it. That's how she ended up in the movie. And the requisite nudity in the movie, of course, comes on behalf of Tracy Savage. Also, and while Dana Kimmel kind of shied away from doing anything in that realm, Tracy Savage said, look, I was more than happy to do it. This is in all of these movies. Somebody always has to get naked, so this time it was fine that it was me. And she says even now today that her friends have created a compilation reel from the movie of her disrobing, and that they watch it. They give her a hard time to watch it for fun. But she was a pretty good sport about that scene, and a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the nudity is almost tasteful, and I think designed to frustrate young teenage boys, because she's in the shower, she's from the side, and you really have to like kind of look to see stuff. I mean, again, I'm a pig, but yeah, it's not the typical like we've seen in some of these other movies, and particularly ones coming up, where it's just straight on like, yep, here's what you paid your $8 for. Get over it. She's gonna be dead in 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, now that said, we get probably the best shower kill in the movie, in the franchise, in the next one, which is Peter Barton, of course.
Oh yeah.
So that we'll talk about next time we get together. But yeah, I mean, I liked her too. I mean, I think a lot of the success of these movies, just not in any of the formal elements of the story or anything, it certainly is in two things. It's in how scary they can be, and the effects are gory they can be, and how charming the cast is. And if you like them, if you like to look at them, and in your case, that definitely was the case with Tracy Savage. Hey, and mine too. And so I think she fit the bill, and so did Jeffrey Rogers. They were a cute couple.
Yeah, that whole thing with the hammock was fun. I mean, this movie, this series really does that kind of couples teen banter really well. I mean, it kind of elevates the material. Particularly in the later movies like the remake in 2009, there's just kind of a lost quality. There's no charm or innocence left to these characters. You really get that sense of these early 80s kind of wholesome all-American kids, facing their worst nightmare.
I mean, at the time, these movies, it was said that these were shallow characters who were empty, who, the movies were an excuse to just, push women into a corner, and it wasn't always women. It was usually equal opportunity skewering, if you want to call it that. But now when we look back at the teenagers in these movies with the 2020 perspective, there is something charming and likable about the simplicity of the characters. What was once thought to be just shallow is now simple, and it's simple and of the time. And I would just argue that something is completely lost now in the majority of movies now, and maybe the later ones in this franchise too, because there's just too much of a hip coolness about the kids. They're too sure of themselves and too confident. And this is young people in the world today too.
Yeah, I know it used to be a critique of some horror movies that there were too many horror movies in which the young kids in them had apparently never seen a horror movie, which is why they made stupid mistakes. Nowadays, it's like everybody has seen every horror movie and they're all over it, and they think they're stupid and that they know everything. Like you said, there's sort of an invincible quality. It's too far in the other direction. But yeah, I think the early Friday the 13th movies, whatever you want to say about them, they did have some, they're not Oscar-worthy characters or anything, but they do feel legit. I was bummed to see all of them, bite the dust, except for the trashy couple at the beginning of the movie that we discussed.
I mean, I miss the tropes of these movies, like the car that won't start, the rainstorm that won't let up, the phone line that's been cut. I mean, one might say that these are just the tried and true tropes. That would be the kind way to say it. Others would say that they're just, hoary cliches that, are leaned on in all of these movies. But I'll tell you, I'll take any of those things over messages coming through an iPhone today in horror movies. So just, we're dating ourselves here, but whatever.
Yeah. So let's jump forward to the very end, or should I say, one of two endings?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. How do you feel about the Mama Voorhees coming up out of the lake, worms, black eyes, and all of that, versus the alternate ending that they also filmed, but I guess never. I don't know if they have a full scene or just stills that were released of Chris going up to the house and getting beheaded. Which are you a fan of?
I would have loved to have seen that. Um, and Larry Zerner says, look, I saw it. He saw it when it was being done. So it's out there somewhere, and it'd be great if they could find it at some point. I don't think it was not cut for any MPAA reason, because the MPAA was kinder to this film than they had been to the one before it. So somebody made a decision to just put it somewhere. I probably would have preferred that one, because as it currently stands, we're just harkening back to the first movie, and there's nothing too special about that, except for the fact that we have Mrs. Voorhees, of course, not played by Betsy Palmer, played by Paula, and her last name is escaping me now. She was the wife of the assistant director, and she sometimes would show up on the convention circuit as well as the other Mrs. Voorhees. But I think that's not a surprise. That's a callback, to be generous, and a callback to just a couple years earlier. So in other words, a callback that is a little bit of a ripoff of the first movie, and I think they could have tried a little harder, and I know they did, and somehow it didn't make it in.
Yeah, I think in addition to just being a ripoff of part one, the Chris getting beheaded would have been a downer ending, but it would have been consistent with, again, the meanness, the savagery of this particular iteration of Jason. And I don't know how they would have left that open for a sequel. Maybe he's just like still stalking around the campgrounds, or maybe she wakes up in the hospital because she just dreamt that she was beheaded. But as freaky as Mrs. Voorhees is with those gray worms coming down her face, it's really ooky. It also just doesn't seem to make any sense, because Chris never saw that cabin with Mrs. Voorhees' head. There's no indication that she had any recollection of Mrs. Voorhees' lore. I mean, you want to talk about narrative inconsistencies. She didn't put two and two together that the thing that attacked her in the woods 2 years earlier was Jason Voorhees. Like, how many woodland killers does this area have?
I know. I mean, honestly, this it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, because Mrs. Voorhees has, she wouldn't even know who she was. It's just for us, right? I mean, that's fan service in that moment. I will say I love the shot in that sequence of her looking up at Jason's face in the window of the house, and he's kind of overjoyed that he's got her trapped again. There's nowhere she can go. She's stuck out in the canoe. So I thought that part of it worked, but I don't think the element of surprise they were going for, with someone coming up out of the water in virtually the same shot, repeated shot from the first film, really works. And I would have preferred the second ending, or the alternate ending.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Jason, when he sees her through that window, he's almost hissing at her, and it's in line. This is the most we hear from Jason, I think, in a lot of these movies. When he gets stabbed in the leg and stabbed in the hand earlier than that, you can hear him groaning in the soundtrack, and it's just kind of dredges up this idea that he's still a living thing. He's not, later in movies when he's just a zombie, you shoot him with guns and you set him on fire, he just doesn't react at all. He just keeps coming like a Terminator. But he's still got some humanity in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting you say that we're at a pivot point almost, where he becomes a mythological character in a way, and in most senses invincible. And even when he is killed, he can come right back out of the grave, as we know, a couple chapters from now, which we'll get to. But there's something about that that shifts the balance of the movie in a way. And as we all know, lots of horror films become more about the villain that people identify with and take as beloved than they do about the victims, who people are happy to see dispatched in the movie. But I think when you're talking about taking a character out of the real world and making them something that is invincible in a way, just because you can do it and not because there's any material laws that tell you that you can do it, you're asking a lot of the audience. You're asking a leap of faith, and you're asking a kind of nudge in the ribs. We're in on the joke that none of this is real. And the second movie doesn't do that. The second movie is grounded in realism. and we're almost at the tipping point at the end of this movie.
Yeah, just about. And, I guess he's still alive, I guess, in the final chapter, but we'll talk about that next month. So for right now, I would like to thank you again for talking Friday the 13th, Part 3, 3D.
Yes.
Actually, this is going up on a Friday the 13th, so this is very exciting.
Excellent. What will you be watching on Friday the 13th? Every Friday the 13th that comes up, we all watch one of them that we really love, and I usually go for 2 or 5. But what will you be watching?
I will probably just be watching some MTV reality show with my wife. I'll be lucky to make it to the end of this week. It's been rough, but no. That's the thing is with this series, I think we have a couple of Friday the 13th this year. So yeah, we'll be right back at it again on one of those days. So well, all right. Thanks again, man. Lee Shoquist from ChicagoFilm.com. Thank you for watching out there in YouTube land, and subscribe and like and share and all that good stuff. And we'll be back next month with the quote unquote final chapter. So thank you again, sir.
And we'll tell everybody it will be quite an interesting topic because many people think that the final chapter is by far the best one in the series, and we're going to tell you whether we agree or not.
Yes, I won't spoil it. In my opinion, anyway. We'll hold that for next month. So
I can feel that there's a theory brewing here somewhere, but we'll save that for next month. So
not yet. So now I have to work on a theory. The pressure. All right, man. Have a good night.
Over and out.